Hello, today is Thursday, August 1st, 2019. This is SIG Arch Conformance subproject. We are just going to walk through some backlog grooming because we have a big backlog and we have other things we want to prioritize. So the purpose of this call is to basically shuffle sort, which is always fun. I think for the time being, I'm going to ignore pull request. So if I'm going to go to filter is issue, right? So I'm going to do it this way because the current pull request we should be reviewing anyways, and we can go through that separately. Or what do other folks think?
Well, if what we're trying to do is come up with priority for how we're going to handle the backlog, that's probably starting with issues at least makes sense. I think that that's fine. If we have time or if we are inclined, we can start looking at PRs too.
Okay.
Our two umbrella tickets for core and core stable and stable core are pretty much the PRs are created or those things are in flight. So from here we just need more new tickets or new.
Yeah.
We can go through these so to help close them because we just want to. Most of them are in progress to either rewrite and don't need attention. The full status. Let me give you. There's another link I have. Justin, do you have that from the channel that we sent to Aaron from Devin?
Sure, I'll grab that.
Yeah, and that's a summary of our tickets.
So why don't we hold off on we'll keep this tab open, move it over here. Let's just try to sort through other issues and then go to the PRs. That sound fair?
Yep.
Pod spec coverage, we could possibly just do that one right now. You currently have, this is the list of none
of them are required except for pod spec containers. And this is, so pod spec is what we wanted to cover.
Some of these are covered, like tolerations. There's at least a few different things around toleration.
And affinity. So I'm kind of curious how you got there's definitely coverage on some of these.
Right now, all of this is just looking at querying the Open API spec directly. It's not related to coverage. I just was trying to see what it was that we could look at, and if there's a uncovered area.
Did you have the query that had the coverage?
No, we've just been focusing on, because this is part of this work was tying in the generating the behaviors. So this is the information we have available for behavior generation as well.
Well, it's impossible for me to figure out without looking through tests and going on the details, right, for the pod spec of what's currently not covered.
Well, I think
that's on the books for next week.
Okay, so right now, Hippie, the API Snoop doesn't introspect on fields, right? So
that's why this is here. It will next week.
Okay.
We needed this data out here both for the generation of the behaviors and also for us to see whether or not it's covered.
Okay. Well, I think that should be an action item, which is high priority, which I don't. That's annoying.
Yes.
So let's create notes here. To do measure field coverage and report back. I would say this is high priority. We don't have we lack this is Brian's view of the world that created this, not necessarily everyone else's. I would just consider it the highest priority. So if I were here, It's kind of currently in progress too.
It's in progress. That's the API Snoop work this week and next week.
All right. So let's take a look at the backlog here of just issues and just kind of get an idea of like,
container image updates. Let's see. If we think about like what are pluggable pieces, and so what we want to evaluate. So I don't know exactly what that is referring to. Container image updates. Is that going to then end up exercising CRI?
it's pretty generic. It doesn't actually have details here.
Maybe we should.
Maybe we should close these, to be honest. They were opened in January. And if we were going by our list, 1 second here. Did your CEP merge, by the way?
I squashed the commits, and I think it's needs DIMS or Ryan or Clayton or somebody, I think.
Yeah, hold on 1 second here. I'm going back on my other screen because I want to get the document. Too many screens, too many windows, too many things.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully it should magically appear. Did you see that update? Yes, no? You did not see an update? Like I'm moving my cursor around, you should have just
Oh, yeah.
okay.
It's in the conformance meeting agenda now.
Okay, yeah. So the so we have pod spec and then pod networking and watches, right? So if we look at the actual list here, we have a bunch of other stuff. Let's endpoints, these components.
It might be interesting while if we get a chance to talk about watches, the history of where it is and how to test it and how to prioritize what we look at on that.
Okay.
There used to be, whenever we're ready.
Yeah, let's table that for right now. What I'm trying to figure out right now is if we should close these because the statements currently being made are pretty. I don't know how.
This came out of probably the email from Brian that said he didn't see any coverage in this area. And some of those things.
Share container namespaces, that's reasonable. Host aliases?
Why is that a whole tracking issue?
Yeah, exactly. Conformance etcd is a good one. Coverage networking.
Yeah.
Container image updates.
That's for the conformance images. Like we had I think there was a command to list images in use. I don't know who wrote it, and then we were trying to reduce that number. It's been in progress in various areas.
Not at all.
There's a bunch of other issues around that are beyond just conformance. I'm going to close this one. I don't understand what it is unless somebody else can make sense out of it.
If it's just updating the container images, that's covered in pod spec, really.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, sorry. A host alias is another one here.
Verifying host alias pod spec behavior. When scheduling a busy box, the host alias should.
It's because it's a pod spec feature, but I think we should open up a different one relating to the output that we're trying to gather. Thoughts?
Yeah, I think that we're going to sort of do a wholesale, like, pod spec that are remaining uncovered.
conformance coverage or kube proxy. Now, the conformance coverage for kube proxy and scheduler are weird to me.
That to me doesn't make sense, right? Kube proxy is an implementation detail of implementing services, and we want to cover services. In fact, we already have a lot of coverage for services. I would just close this. Conformance shouldn't even know kube proxy exists. It just knows services work.
Fair.
I'd say same with scheduler. There are aspects to properties of fields, but it's not.
Right. You want to cover scheduling behavior. And we do have some coverage for scheduling behavior. And it's going to fall out of pod spec, and not really. It's going to fall out of pod spec for the most part.
All right, so that one's done. Now let's go back here. I don't know why it keeps on resetting my window every time I go here. Now, pod spec coverage. I started to, oops.
Thanks, Renee.
So to do measure field coverage and report back. Should we add any other detail there?
So I wanted to quickly get some vocabulary that may not be clear. Is within our Swagger, we have the operations, which are the paths combined with the HTTP verbs that give the operations. Each of the endpoint/operations has parameters, and those parameters can be required or optional. What you pass to parameters are what I'm calling resources. Sometimes they're called kinds, sometimes they're called types, but they're the definition objects inside of Swagger. Those resources are the things that Kubernetes uses types or kinds, and they're referred to as types elsewhere. Those resources have another sub thing called properties when they point to other resources. So we can have required parameters for our operations, and we can also have required properties for our resources. And so trying to clarify, when we look at this query, we're looking at the properties of resources that are required for the resource, not the required parameters for our operations, because those are all separate. And there may be, because properties can point to other resources. Pod spec, for example, may be at the endpoint or in the middle point of a DAG for any particular API call. Because whatever you're passing as a parameter to an operation might at some point need a pod spec defined, because each of the resources that are called to it at some point hit a pod spec, even though pod spec itself is not directly referenced in any API operation.
Right. So we're saying when we create and delete pods, we're creating, we want to look at the variability possible in a pod spec, which is what we use to create or add pods, and that that's what you've got here. And then it's a tree. There's probably even loops in it, but for our purposes, it's a tree where we're going to. It's like a big combinatorial tree that we're going to dig into each of these. So containers.
It's totally a graph.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to ask the entry point. So do you want me to focus on operations and the parameters of those operations that include with anyone within their graph pod spec? And then within that's the particular operations and parameters that include pod spec. And then within the properties, how far down the tree, what are we looking for? How are we going to measure that? Are we wanting to look at all the kinds that are referenced from any operation that includes parameters that include some sub-referenced pod spec?
I think you have just jumped inside your own belly button of complexity. I think this is far simpler than what you are currently raising.
I hope so.
I don't know, for example, like a pod liveness probe, pod healthiness probe, and the timeouts related therein. Like, how would we want to combinatorically express those, right? I did want to dive down into what kinds of probes can be used. So I do need to introspect that resource a little bit, which is how I discovered that we had tests for HTTP and exec, but we didn't have tests for the TCP probe. We do now. Mm-hmm. What other introspection should we be doing?
That's kind of the question we were asking. I think just analyzing the individual.
I guess fields where does field map? Is that parameters or is that resource properties?
Resource properties.
Okay.
So measuring field coverage or resource property coverage seems like the reasonable thing to do, and it doesn't need to transitively close across everything that uses PodSpec, right, as well as everything below that graph of these fields. Basically, just what is the raw field coverage that we have, ignoring everything else, and then going from there.
I think over time we'll drill into those individual ones, right? Like
sure.
But we can, even if we start with what's the coverage at the root of PodSpec, and then
there's a thing out there that Knative uses right now, which I keep poking Hippie or somebody if they want to try like bringing it over here. It's a forest of trees and how covered is the forest. And all they check is whether or not fields are set. Don't check what they're set to. So we're not covering over, is it empty? Is it, the maximum length? Does it have all of the different enums if it's that sort of thing? But it's like, is it touched at all? I feel like we could start there. But I do think we'll eventually want to know, like, are we actually using, this set of values?
Yeah, and I think that's a good starting point, and that's the point where we should, like, to be honest, that's what the point we should have started at like months ago, right? Like it's a finite fixed amount of work to verify, and it should take no more than a couple days to get it all sorted out if this is the primary function, right? If like I don't have a couple days to devote towards anything, right? That's just not the way my work life is anymore. Like I'm the overseer of many things, so I don't get time to do anything. So if you can take a look at just this and what are the current tests that cover it, and take a look at how they cover it, and take a look at what fields are not being covered at all, that seems like a reasonable thing to do.
Okay. Thanks for the clarity on that.
So if I'm looking back at just the issues, and we closed a bunch of them, the question here is to sort these issues. Like we considered watch to be high up on the list. And I know that etcd coverage and etcd behavior was somewhat there too, right? Let's take a look at just put a little bit of ordering behind this. The stable endpoints hit by core Kubernetes components. This seems like across. This is currently in progress anyways.
Same for umbrella issue.
Graceful termination, that should be part of pods, right?
Yes.
So why do we even need this?
Why don't we just close it in reference to pod? You could say if the pod one's going to cover the root level, then this is going into one of those. It's fine.
One thing I thought to note is that in our definition of behaviors or our test stuff, we've got sequences of operations that won't be exactly trackable by just looking at our fields.
Sure. Let's do baby steps. Step one, look at fields.
How is shake
So-
container namespace is not captured in pod spec?
It's pods. It's totally should be captured in pod spec. It's
Yeah.
I don't know how loud my keyboard is for everyone else.
It is incredibly loud. Impressive.
That's how I know you're doing work.
I think Tim had a
Jerry
stroke.
Brown.
All right, so I'll leave these two as etcd and then networking, and we just closed a bunch of other ones, right? So that's pretty decent as far as overall issue backlog is concerned. So let's start with PodSpec. Let's get some coverage there. These other things are kind of in flight, and we should evaluate the PRs. Should I switch to PR view now? Or do we have other things that we want to talk about? So we talked about PodSpec, and we said watches were P1, but let's do 0 first.
Yeah, and watches like we don't even have like it documented really how watches are supposed to behave very clearly, at least not the edge cases. I mean that's kind of part of what has to be done first, right? That's the
From the perspective that I have, I'll pull in some type of report to give us what I know from observation and also from API spec. It'd be good to know from people with experience and knowledge and documentation what it's actually expected to do outside of that.
So, I have one quick unrelated ask before I have to go disappear. I got an approve on the cap. I also got a hold. Is there any reason I shouldn't remove the hold? I got Jace to drop an approve as a Arch lead.
Here's the whole.
It's like, I think just to make sure we've communicated it, and I don't feel a need to do that.
No, I'm okay with removing the hold and just say like we talked as part of grooming on whatever year, month, day it is, and agreed to unblock this.
Okay. Sounds good. Thanks. And
Thank you, Aaron.
Oops, wrong key.
All right, so just the PRs. We have a bunch waiting for approval. That's good. A couple in review. That's good. Several in progress. Also good. We only have 2 in the backlog that really need to be looked at. This validation.
That one, Brad reached out to me because I think I'm the last one who commented and said, "Hey, there's several comments he hasn't addressed on there," and so all I said was, "Hey, address these comments and then we can merge it." But he was asking me what needs to be done, so I'm not really. I'll have to reach out to him again.
Another way to do this too. Well, another way to do this is just basically take the original PR, give attribution with his initial commit, then add your commit for the comments for the changes, and just merge, right? Like that, or assign me and we can merge and get it done.
Okay. Well, when we squash the commits, we would lose his commit. But
don't squash commits on that particular one. So like you typically for a single person, if you're not going to do attribution, then we say squash a commit because there's no reason to have multiple commits on a single PR. But for this one, if he's, I don't know, when's the last time you updated it?
Well, he did ping me like yesterday, or like I haven't responded to him on Slack, but he pinged me on Slack like yesterday. So I'll give him a chance to address whatever may be there. I'll have to go back and look at it and see what it was needed to be addressed. But there were a few things the comments that I thought were still open.
Okay. Refactor kube control retrieve logs test to use agnost. I can take a look at this one because, or actually, why don't I take a look at this and also force John to take a look at it because he's been doing that work anyways.
All right.
Hold on a second, I gotta sneeze. Sorry about that. All right, so kabang. It's in progress. Promote E2A test for pod eviction, no execute taint to conformance. Looks like you're already on this, John.
It might be, but I just never moved it out of the triage, I guess. Why does it still say 18 in triage if we looked at issues and PRs? What else could there be in triage?
It's a good question. I'm going to go back in a second.
Looks like Aaron. Oh, did Aaron drop? Aaron.
Okay.
I'll just go ahead and put it in progress, and I'll either close it or.
So apparently, these look like issues.
That's weird.
I thought there was nothing there.
Yeah, we searched. Oh, GitHub.
Hold on, let me try this again. So I suspect.
Oh, you got a space. Yep. So it's just the ones that are issue in the title.
That's very different.
Yay, GitHub. All right, so promote resource quota test to conformance. Provoke a config. I don't think we need these issues open, honestly.
Yeah, we weren't sure whether to start tracking. So we would create the issue first because we knew we wanted to promote something in that area, and then we had to identify which test. But I don't think that'll be a common pattern going forward. This is just for the promote.
I think like just having a single umbrella for like pod spec, that seems legit. Like, and then
Agreed.
we can do that. But I think the I'm going to close these other ones.
Yep.
All right, fix image util package to grab registry instead of using static image path. That's a good idea. I thought this was fixed a long time ago, though.
Something merged and something.
Hold on.
Oh, this is from. Oh, I see. He put in 4 days ago a bunch of stuff that can be fixed.
This one's closed. I don't know what needs to be done here.
Right there, 4 days ago, MG DevStack. Following references should be fixed. So there's still a bunch of them in various end-to-end tests. It looks like.
Okay. I will leave this.
I would rename it something like, clean up, umbrella issue to clean up image references, but it's not really conformance. Are those in conformance tests or are those just in EDEs?
I don't know.
Yeah.
What I'm going to do, because he's not actually working on this anymore, I'm going to he's not here, so I can assign him. Let's see if I can. He was working on stuff like that anyways, so it's in the backlog. Pod spec, umbrella. That's in progress. I don't think this needs to be on the top here. I would say, I know conformance tests are fixed to use a different registry. At least last I knew that, because we actually had customers that required that. So
I'm guessing these are just it. He just grabbed through end to ends, and this is.
I'm gonna leave it as long term and move down the list because it can't be. I know people that have requirements where it has to be air gapped.
You just moved the wrong one, I think.
Oops.
but I also consider that one low priority because I don't think we need to, like, the fact that it just tests config map isn't to me a huge, that machinery should work the same for different resource types, so I'm not all that worried about it.
I thought we needed to, I thought we actually documented this. Didn't we finish this?
I think this is, we documented that they shouldn't need them for now, but I thought that we, currently conformance tests say no, we shouldn't need them, but we do have to deal with the issue of, you know, if I don't know, if Red Hat wants to run conformance against some multi-cluster system where they're not going to have, they're going to only be able to run in a namespace they have control over, like, should that be okay?
I don't think so. Well, I think if you, it should be a requirement that conformance should have root, right? In OpenShift, you can give root level access, where you can see.
Yeah, I know. I'm, you know, obviously that's just an example, but like if somebody's running a pure Kubernetes as a service that's some multi-tenanted backend, I don't know. Right now, I think the guidance in the document is they must not require privileged in order to be a conformance test. And I think that this, whether it's this issue or another one, needs to be open to say, how do we handle different user roles in conformance? What does it mean, conformance? If conformance is specifically just for branding, then maybe requiring privileged is fine because it's just the providers that are going to run them. But if conformance is for users to be able to evaluate whether their workloads are, whether the cluster is going to allow their workloads to be portable, then it's a different question and it has different implications for different user roles.
Well, it's by definition, it's supposed to be portability, right? So like it's, I mean, that's the whole purpose of the effort.
Right, but portability is possible, or portability for this particular cluster, right? Like portability, to say the way the program works, it's about the providers. It's, hey, my distribution of Kubernetes can be configured in a way such that it is conformant, versus this particular cluster right now that I'm looking at is conformant.
Yeah, well, that's part of the conformance process, is they have to submit the configuration that they used so that it can be reproducible to get the conformance behavior. And if a person comes back and says that it's not conformant, like OpenShift, for example, right? That's because they're in a multi-tenant environment where they don't have those capabilities. The cluster itself is conformant, but your view of the world as a user is not. Like, you cannot do all the things. So I put us on there as still backlog.
Okay.
I think from a, I'm going to move it down
Sure.
to the bottom here. Promote container runtime end-to-end test to conformance. Let me close some of these tabs up here. Keep this over here. Close that. Here we go. I think the problem is that they were executing in absentia of trying to get like a call like this going, where we're trying to like sort the backlog together. Promote container runtime tests to conformance suite. Container runtime end-to-end tests. That's CRI tests?
That's what it sounds like. They're talking about termination message, which, as I recall, was a Linux only. What does that last comment say?
E2 test messaging should report termination message, and we're not supposed to use those. He's got the two things checked here. I'm inclined to close this because this is not like, I'd rather.
For the issue, what's the last thing there?
This one is closed. It's like a chain.
I know. Yeah, it's always so. It's a graph, actually. Issues from the same issue.
Yeah. All right, so this one is still left open. I'm inclined, if I go back to the root of what I was looking at, I'm inclined to just close this one. It seems like there are dependencies on the issue, but I don't think it's.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I think that whatever some things have been merged and whatever hasn't been is going to get covered in the pod spec most likely.
Yeah. Kabang, kabang. So I would say this is number one and you're going to work on this, so it's in progress.
Yeah.
Create ET test case coverage for admit pod by sorted order. What?
What is that?
I don't know.
Pod port conflict.
Well, this seems like just a pod field check, right? Let me just take a look here real quick. It was closed. Why was it closed?
I hear you scrolling with the little scroll wheel, and my arm is starting to hurt. Like just hearing that. I use that thing all the time. Whenever I use it too much, my arm.
Yeah. I don't even know. It looks like it's more of a removal than anything else. I don't see why. Okay, I'm going to close it.
No, I think yeah. Looks like it's trying to test some subtle behavior around pod creation and when they take up ports and what ordering it should be in.
Yeah, I think let's just focus on whatever, like these are the priorities we've listed.
Yeah.
Let's just try and clean out this pod quality of service. I'm just going to close this immediately. Closing in favor of what's the number again here? I should just have that tab open.
The big pod spec issue. This is a big umbrella. We need sub umbrellas.
Yeah,
once
that's
we
big. I
find one.
mean, it's central, right?
This is useful.
I don't know. Why is that? If it works for config map, do we really think it's not going to work for other things? What's the? I don't know. Face validity to me, like there's no. I have no reason to believe that it's not going to work. We have coverage of the watch mechanics. Do we need it on
So the problem is because the inner workings of the GUI goes through a separate layer on the back end of this of how there's a separate area that eventually gets into the same watcher code. So part of the unmarshalling hits a totally separate code path that is totally forked in the API server
for config map versus other things?
For all the resources. So every single they all eventually back into the storage layer, but there's a whole middle tier. So there's like auto-generated GUI, middle tier, storage layer, then etcd.
Okay, so there's some piece in the middle that is going to vary per resource that may affect watch behavior.
Yes, and not only that, but there's also a separate set of middle tier GUI on pagination and other stuff. So there is the behavior could change.
I think we tried to promote one test that was doing chunking, right? Is that what you mean by paging?
Yeah, pagination. The chunking is pagination.
You open this one. We have
Which one?
SSH keys.
I would say, yeah, that shouldn't be there. So we can do that as Important. Fix util package to grab registry instead of static image path. That's already long-term important. Verify TCP socket property of V1 Pro. Wow, this is oddly specific. Along with successive failure threshold.
I think that was something that Aaron talked about earlier. He identified that property wasn't being set. It was clearly identified.
Right. And that came out of, looks like pod spec, container spec.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Sweet. Closing another one.
Be sure and do the reference. So yeah, I'll get it'll be
I mean, I think
list of things to go back and look at.
I think Aaron's point was this one comes out of like actually enumerating the different types of probes that you can do, which is like a further refinement on our first step here.
Yeah. Step one, measure. Step two, refine and see how deep the rabbit hole goes just on pod spec.
Model, analyze, and repeat, right?
Yeah, here you go. All right, so I think we've cleared out the sorted backlog. I think we can. We might be able to kill some things over here. Can we what? He's typing.
I'm dropping a couple PRs that my team has done that we'd like to nudge.
Hold on.
And where are these right now? These are in progress or in review or something?
I'm not sure what column they're in. Does it say?
Needs approval.
If they're in needs approval, then Tim and I
Yeah,
aren't
that'd be
the
done.
ones.
Okay.
We're not. This one needs a review.
But I'll say that Brian does not want to keep doing this. So expanding the pool beyond Brian and Clayton would be helpful.
Is there you need to be this high to ride that we can define clearly for that? Those are big shoes to fill.
I think, it doesn't make.
So I assign myself to it, so it'll show up on my radar. If I'm not assigned to something, if you CC me at anything, it just goes to /dev.
The noise. Okay, we'll do assigns to. Who else should we assign? I feel bad just straight assigning, but should we go ahead and assign it to you too, and Aaron?
I think if they're PRs, we should talk about them in the meeting and assign them. So like, if you have, that's the whole, that should be part of the meeting, right?
All right. So are we meeting every other week?
Yes.
And then it's the off week of when we have the main meeting. So at least once a week, we'll be able to say, here's our PRs that need reviews. Please help.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if they're,
And if you want to, every 3 or 4 days, if you just assign me and say /assign Tim, could you please find somebody to review? What I'll do is I can use it for routing then. Okay.
Thank you for routing.
And I go through that list every couple days. So like my average backlog, it's not near Hawkins level, but it's not, it's not manageable. So 40 PR is not bad. So we got this sort of backlog done. We addressed your PR question. Leave that open. We'll move that all the way over here. Go back to here. Now the last is we only got 9 minutes. We can start down trying to close out some of these, like conformance test for S390X. Sorry, not important. Totally not important to me. I'm going to leave that in backlog. Like writing good conformance test doc required. I think that's opened by Quentin. How old is this thing?
I think he's referring some document. Yeah.
We've already done this, though. We've already have enough documents.
I think we have a lot of documents, yeah.
Somewhat. I don't know if there's like good examples to follow. Like, there's general. Well, I think it needs improvement, but I don't know if it needs to be this.
Well,
issue.
if you want to take this hippie and like you references some documents he wrote before, and if you because we've got a new team coming and looking at this,
Yeah,
actually,
that's fair.
you could grab some of his material and put it in there, put it in a doc somewhere.
Thanks.
Yeah.
That is becoming a priority.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to update the list here.
I guess I was supposed to create an issue on this, which I hadn't done yet, but this is kind of partly it. I'll probably add a little context to it.
I'm not even going to touch PVC. That's profiles. Without anything that's profiles goes way down the list. Make scale images part of conformance suite? No way.
No, that in fact is a non-starter, I would say. Like, and I talked to Wojciech from Scalability about this. Like, I think this is not a good idea. I think Brian's on board with that as well. What we did talk about is like maybe having some sort of bar that says, but even that's not conformance. Like conformance is not a measure of quality. Put it that way. And there's way too many use cases for this one.
I've closed so many issues today. I'm on the
Yeah.
game.
The boss.
All right. Add tests or storage framework. That's like way down with PVs and PVCs.
Pardon me.
Certificate signing request API out of beta. What the heck does this? Oh, they want to have promotions should have conformance coverage. I think CSRs are a good example of that. I don't know why there's a. I don't think the issue should be conformance. I think the PR should be there.
It's not even labeled area conformance. It shouldn't really be in this. Yeah.
It's on the project board. When the API, when they do the PR, then sure. Document or remove Kubernetes conformance PR
Provider.
Okay, performance provider. I'll just leave that. Unable to run persistent volume E2E tests due to security. This doesn't seem.
August 1st, 2018. It's 1 year old today.
Why is this even a conformance thing?
In a bug, and it looks like it was global.
No, it wasn't. Brian added it.
I think we were trying to find some way to do PVCs without needing to use storage. Trying to do some type of storage work.
Oh, it's in order to get some CSI testing without having to have a provider-specific driver.
We need some type of default implementation that we can layer on top of everybody or something. I don't know.
But that's what profiles is. We really need to document this as profiles. So I'll leave this open.
Yeah, well, there was some discussion of that there may be things we can do even outside of profiles, but
Current conformance test called non-GA APIs. What?
fun. So what it probably means is that, right, you have the things that are incidentally accessed in performance tests. Like we just did service validation, and in order to do that, we use anti-affinity, right? So if anti-affinity isn't covered, we're incidentally covering it when we cover services.
Yeah, I added it to long-term backlog.
Yeah.
Should include Windows images in their manifest list. I'll let them deal with that. Check conformance test called GA APIs only. That's kind of a duplicate of this, isn't it? Oh, check. He wants to add a test. That's really hard to do.
check conformance.
I'll just leave it there.
That would be that. Those
We
are
have that data in API Snoop. We could just have a query like to see if it's hitting those tests or not. It's not available in the source code, but it is available via API Snoop.
I'll just leave it here in the list.
those seem like they should be merged, but okay.
Promote node test to conformance. There's a bunch of work here. Hold on, how many do we have left here?
Most of those node tests that. Okay, assign that one to me, because I've gone over those with Don, and most of those are like not things that we can necessarily promote, unless these are different ones.
Or should I move it to in progress? Or
Yeah.
move it to sort of backlog?
Go to backlog.
Okay. Oops, wrong one.
Well, that one, pod template, that's part of pod's back. Oh, well, that's part of deployment, I guess. What is that?
This is one of those ones that you did analysis of that you could do extra coverage for.
It will gain a coverage point.
Yeah, but I think I closed or one of those PRs would be like it does it indirectly.
Yeah, Rube Goldberg.
Yeah, so I think I'm going to close this one. Closing due to Rube Goldberg.
We need to add a prowl bot command for the Goldberg.
Coverage. Right. I don't know why it does this.
Too many columns.
Promote pod test to performance.
It's a bad title. It was when our team was learning what we were looking at. So again, it's just a parent, umbrella ticket.
Yeah. All right. We are pretty much at time. We'll probably call it for now. I think we did enough sorting. I think the most important one is the one that is the only one marked critical. And that'd be awesome to get an update next conformance meeting, or even before then. I'll make time for that one.
I'll make it a priority.
All right. How are you doing, John? Anything else? Good?
I think that's it. I'm good. Yeah.
All right, cool. Have a great weekend.
Thank you for your time, Tim. Thank you
Take
for your
care.
time, Joe.
Thank you for your time, guys.
Bye.